This week on GamerHeads, we welcome Robert Ramsey, Push Square's deputy editor, and we talk about Fortnite. We're talking about Spider-Man. We review Stay on the PS4 and Time Carnage on Nintendo Switch, and then we get into our hot topic this week. Get ready, because here's another episode of GamerHeads. And welcome to another episode of GamerHeads. My name is Roger, aka Rogue Leader 76, and with me this week we have my co-host Christian,
aka Fulgen,
and our other co-host Blue.
I guess this is where I say aka Rider's View?
Yeah, that works.
Okay.
Blue is new. She was on last week, but then we asked her to be a regular on the show, and she agreed. So, yay! We're happy to have you.
Thanks, I'm happy to be here.
And then we have a very special guest from Push Square. We have Robert.
Hello.
Do you have?
Nice to be here.
Do you have a handle, like a PS4 handle or something?
Shogun Rock with a K, okay. No C. So Shogun ROK.
Nice. So yeah, that's one of our things we always just say our tags. I don't know why, but it's something that we did in episode 1, and it just continued on. So, so yeah, welcome, Robert. So, we'd like to get to know a little bit about you first before going into the podcast. So why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about who you are, how you got into games reviews or doing game reviews, and yeah, I think that should be good.
Oh, that could be a long story, but no, I'll keep it short. Okay, so I am the deputy editor of pushsquare.com, which is a PlayStation-centric website, only for PlayStation stuff. And I started on that website in 2012, something like that.
Wow,
and at that
the world
point,
ended.
Yeah, that was the cause. And I started out as a volunteer reviewer, which they only had one person on the website at that point, my still editor Sammy, and Sammy Barger. Hi Sammy. And he was looking for various writers for various things, and I wanted to do reviews on PS3, and I sent in I'd never done anything like it before, sent in a few little things, and bam, I was in. And then, you know, fortunately I had the time and the resources, I guess, to just like maintain my output on it as a volunteer. And then soon enough, in 2014, I got brought on part-time, and then in 2017, I went on full-time. And that's the story.
Wow.
Hard work.
I can't, because like, you write a lot for the site. I was surprised that 2017 is when you brought on full-time. Yeah,
that's right. I think before that it was maybe a year and a half part-time, something like that. But yeah, the whole idea was to get the site to a point where I could be employed. And yeah, because of, mainly because of Sammy's hard work and some of my hard work, we're able to get there. And now we're here in 2018. It's been
awesome.
good.
That's awesome. And so you're mainly PlayStation. We'll kind of get into this, but you're mainly PlayStation reviews then, correct? You don't review for any Nintendo Life or anything, correct?
Well, Nintendo Life's our sister website. Okay. And I've written maybe a couple of reviews for them, but nothing major, just over the years.
Okay.
So it's solely PlayStation.
And just curiosity, what happened to the Xbox site? Because you guys used to have an Xbox site too, right?
I don't know the exact details, but it was just a case of, I don't know, because obviously we're all owned by the same company and the same directors. Mm-hmm. And the Xbox website just, I don't know whether it was a case of kind of just saying, okay, well, let's focus on PlayStation and Nintendo, or maybe the fan base of Xbox isn't quite the same, because we've always said that PlayStation and Nintendo especially, have like this nostalgia value now. You know, they've been going for decades, and Xbox doesn't really have that yet. It's obviously there's a lot of people who like Xbox, and there's obviously a lot of hardcore Xbox fans, but it doesn't have that that same kind of nostalgic quality of the other two, and maybe that ties into it. But it was just a case of kind of, I think they wanted to focus a lot more on Nintendo and PlayStation at this point.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I found that interesting because, well, I don't know how popular Xbox is over in Europe, but certainly in Japan, I think I saw a stat or heard a stat that like, I don't know, like 51 were sold all of last year or something like that. It was crazy. I usually cover the Japanese hardware and software charts on Push Square. And there's always at least one comment about how, the Xbox has sold 47 units this week, and it's like, wow. Well, that's right. It was a week, not a year.
It is crazy.
That's crazy. Yeah.
I mean, you're not far off, to be honest, with 47 a year. It is tiny. It is at a point where you wonder what Microsoft will they even bother next generation to do anything in Japan.
Yeah, I'm surprised they even ship anything, because I would think shipping costs would be a lot more expensive than the sales that they're getting. So that's crazy.
Yeah, it is totally crazy.
They sell more Vitas over there than they do.
Yeah. That's a poor gauge of success for Microsoft.
Oh no.
And one other question I have, and then we'll go into other things. But are you surprised? So you're located in the UK. Are you surprised on the outreach that you get worldwide? I mean, because you got a lot of followers across all different countries.
Yeah, very much kind of because obviously the three editors, there's myself, Sammy as our editor, and our senior staff writer who came on at the start of this year, Stephen Tailby, and we're all from the UK, so our writing kind of has like this very English feel about it, or this very British feel about it, and we kind of think that's, it's kind of a selling point, I guess. It's like, well, what we like to think, but I don't know, it's definitely resonated with an international audience. Most of our audience are American,
really?
But we get a lot of British people, a lot of Europeans, and some from just about everywhere, to be honest. Like quite a lot from Asia, Africa, like crazy stuff. South America, especially. But yeah, it's great. It's great. Very international.
Yeah, that's great. And I do love hearing your or reading the bylines on a lot of your articles. That make me laugh.
Yeah, we're always it's like a constant competition to try and. I mean, we don't get it every time. It's impossible to come up with like a really good pun on every news story, but the competition always is that if I can make Sammy groan, or if I can make Steven groan, then we've won. You know what I mean? It's got to be like so bad that everyone goes, "Oh, I can't believe you wrote that." That's the goal, awesome. Anyway.
Well, as a reader, I appreciate that. So
thanks.
Well, we're glad to have you on the show. Yeah. Well, we're glad to have you on the show. So I do have an icebreaker before we get into the show. So actually, I'll probably go through what we're going to be talking about today on the show. So we do have news, of course. We do have 2 game reviews. We have Stay on the PS4, which Christian reviewed, and then we have Time Carnage on the Switch, which I reviewed. So we'll go through those today as well. And then we'll go into our hot topic, which is about game reviews, and that's why we have Robert with us today. And then we'll go into games we play. But before we get into all that, then, let's go into our icebreaker. And this week's icebreaker is brought to you by nobody. We don't have any sponsors yet. So if you want to sponsor the show, please reach out to us, and we'd be more than happy to have sponsors on the show. So this week, the icebreaker is, what is your most prized video game possession? And Robert, since you are a guest, I'll start with you. What is your most prized video game possession?
Let's think. I did have a think about this before I came on, and I still couldn't really come up with a proper answer, but I think it is a Yakuza. You know, the series Yakuza? I have a hoodie.
Ooh.
A Yakuza hoodie that is custom made, but it was a gift.
Wow.
But it's got you know, the main character Kazuma.
Mm-hmm.
It's got his dragon. It was one of the best gifts I've ever been given.
And were
I
you
think
getting that because you reviewed the game, or?
No. Unfortunately, it wasn't a bribe, which I am totally open to. But no, it was it was a gift from my brother who does graphic design.
Wow.
So, and he was like, "You're gonna love this," and I was like, "Oh, am I really?" And I opened it, and I was like, "Yeah, I love this. This is amazing." But yeah,
That's sweet.
That is awesome. Well, I'm not sure if I can top that. Blue, why don't you go next?
I'm not sure I can top that either. But I would say that my most prized video game possession is a strategy guide to Donkey Kong Country on the Super Nintendo.
Wow.
When I was a kid, I saved up my money from doing chores and I bought it all by myself. And then I played the game for hours and hours and hours. And using the guide, I got 101% completion.
Wow.
So every secret, every single banana, I got
That's
it
sweet.
all.
Wow.
I was like bragging to everybody I knew, and they're like, "Wait, what game is that?" Nobody properly understood how amazing it was, but it was amazing to me.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that probably that strategy guide is probably pretty hard to find nowadays too.
My sister recently gave me, because I don't know what happened to the one I had as a kid. I'm sure it ended up in the trash or something because I used it until it was falling apart. But my sister recently gave me a new one. She found one somewhere and gave it to me, and it was an amazing surprise.
That's awesome. Very cool. I have not beaten that game, by the way. So
I have a guide you can use.
Yeah. Nice. Christian, what about you? What's your most prized possession?
I'm going to disappoint everyone that's ever been born because I don't really.
Shocking.
Yeah, that's my life. I'm a walking disappointment to my friends and family because I don't really have any video game memorabilia from my childhood. It's kind of all just gotten thrown out over the years or kind of gone by the wayside.
Sad.
So I've kind of retroactively invested myself in a piece of video game hardware, and that is my Wii U. Because I got a Wii U, and I intend to keep it for as long as possible. I see people selling their Wii U's all the time, and I'm like, not a lot of these were sold. And so I'm going to keep mine, and I'm just going to sit on it. I'm going to sit on my Smash for Wii U and all my GameCube Smash controllers and my Bayonetta with the 2 discs, Bayonetta 1 and 2. And I'm just going to sit on it for a nice long time and cherish it for a good long while.
Yeah. There's a reason that there weren't that many sold, though. You know that, right?
Yeah, I know.
Wow.
Don't break his heart.
I'm reminded every time I get out the gamepad. What about you, though, Roger?
For myself, well, I'll tell you the one that I wish I had and I don't have anymore. When I was a kid, I had a Legend of Zelda board game, and it was amazing. You'd have little pieces for the heart containers, and you could take on different bosses, and it would have different dungeons. And my mom sold it at a rummage sale for like $1.50.
What?
And
Ouch.
yeah. When I was a kid, and I was like totally upset about that. She also sold my Fireball Island, but I was able to find that, and I bought that at a game store.
Cool.
But what I own now, I would have to say, actually, it's the book that I just got from Patrick, The Minds Behind the Games, by Patrick Hickey Jr., because he signed it, and it's awesome, and I love it. So that is my most prized possession. I was going to say all my Disney Infinity characters, but that's like more than one, so I have a lot of them because my daughter wanted all of them, and I didn't say no, so
Nice.
my daughter wanted them.
Yeah.
That's a good excuse.
Air quotes, my daughter wanted it.
Real good excuse.
Tell it to the shrink, Roger.
Yeah. All right, so let's go into then our news, and we have a couple items here. I'll go through these items, but then again, if you have anything that you want to bring up, Robert or Blue or Christian, feel free to do so. The very first item that I have here is from CNET, and it is how Fortnite addiction has been cited as a cause for divorce. Yeah, it was like 5%. This is actually out of a study out of the UK. So I think there was like 4,000 reported cases. Like they report why the reason for divorce, and 200 of them were because of Fortnite.
Wow, that's pretty crazy.
That is crazy. We talked about this. Was that last week or the week before? We talked about how hockey players are really addicted to Fortnite, and now I guess marriages are being destroyed by Fortnite. What is this monster known as Fortnite?
If you're getting divorced over Fortnite, you probably weren't all that well off to begin with. Let's be honest, Roger.
That's true.
Stop playing Fortnite, Roger.
I don't even play that game. I don't even play that game.
To me, it sounds like the kind of thing like, should it really count in the stat unless both of the partners agree that was the reason? Because like it sounds like the thing that one of them would say, well, that other one won't stop playing Fortnite,
That's
and
a
the
good
other
point.
person's going, wait, what? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
It just
That's
sounds
a good
like
point.
somebody would answer that out of just being vindictive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. I didn't even think of that. And I would also like to see what the respondents would have been of male versus females, right? So, like, was it the males saying, oh, my wife plays too much Fortnite? Or was it the wives saying, my husband plays too much Fortnite? I don't know. It'd be interesting. But that is a really good point. Because if you asked the other partner, they would have been like, no, that's not the reason. Or there's a reason that they are playing so much Fortnite. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's
Fortnite
true.
addiction is a symptom. It's not a cause.
Yep. So, Robert, do you play Fortnite? Are you a Fortnite player?
I've played a little bit of Fortnite, but I feel like I'm too hip for Fortnite now. You know what I mean? Like it's almost it's way too mainstream.
Yeah. Did you play it back before it had Battle Royale when it was cool?
Yes, I did. I played when it was like it was like a horde mode style thing with the crafting and stuff. Yeah, I got I think I got early access codes to that, like through review.
Wow.
And I played a bit of that, and I was like, it's all right.
Nice. Blue, are you a Fortnite player? Do you play Fortnite?
You know, I never have. I just have so many other things going on, and I just have never actually gotten around to trying it for myself.
Yeah.
But my husband plays every once in a while with his friends online, and so I've seen a few games and know what it's about. But I think the interesting part is that they don't play it very long before they run off and want to do something else.
Interesting.
Yeah. That's kind of how, I mean, I think I played all of like 3 matches of Fortnite, and I didn't get the appeal, so, but it's not for me.
So your marriage
yeah, marriage is saved. This one comes from Push Square, this next item here, that Spider-Man, the stock of Spider-Man of physical copies is running out in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wow.
That's cool.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Sounds like
great.
That's because I think it because it did. Oh, I can't remember the numbers now, but it was pretty high. It was like 100,000 copies in its first 3 days, something like that.
Yeah, like it was like 125, maybe. I'm not sure. I don't know. I think that was on your site.
Yeah, I don't read that. No, but it was but yeah, it did really well, and I think it's of this generation, so of the PS4 generation, it's one of like the best selling Western developed games, because generally speaking, Japanese games sell best in Japan. Like, you know, you have a few outliers, like God of War did pretty well, Uncharted did pretty well. You know, if Sony's got the backing of like these Western games, then they'll tend to do like okay. But Spider-Man did really well, and it's kind of, I suppose it's not really a massive surprise that maybe it's close to sell now, because I assume Japanese retailers look at Western games and think, we won't get many copies of that.
Yeah, exactly.
So
especially something like Spider-Man, which like takes place in New York, and it's very quintessentially American.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but I mean, I suppose it shows that Spider-Man's such a global thing as well. You know, I think you go to any country in the world and say, "Hey, do you know who Spider-Man is?" Of course, you know it's at that point now, I suppose, the fiction of it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and maybe they got the game and then they're like, this is nothing like our Japanese version of Spider-Man.
Yeah. Is there a Japanese Spider-Man?
Have you ever seen those like weird videos of Spider-Man from Japan? Like they're so bizarre. Like,
oh, I'm gonna have to look these up.
oh,
Is this like
dances?
anime Spider-Man?
No. Oh no, it's somebody dressed up as Spider-Man.
Oh, okay. No, maybe I don't want to watch them. It's okay.
Oh, boy.
It is bizarre.
Maybe it's like how if you go to like Tokyo Disney World or whatever, people weren't getting into it because they didn't know the characters, and so before you go in, like you had to have introductory videos so that then they could go in and enjoy the park, having been briefed on who everybody was.
Yeah, I heard about that. I heard that and I also heard that people in Japan, I'll have to ask my brother this because he lives there, but that they'll go to Disney World and they'll cosplay as some of the characters there. Like, it's so weird.
Is
so
that
bizarre.
allowed?
Wow.
If
I
you
don't
do
know.
that here in America, you're thrown out.
Really?
I know, yeah.
Is this allowed? Like in posters?
Oh my goodness.
Well, I think because, what if you dress up as Mickey Mouse and then somebody comes up and then you're just like so mean. Like now you're destroying the brand, right?
Oh no.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Disney is like mega hyper controlled over their brand, and so if somebody comes in and is playing, Mickey Mouse or somebody without permission, no, you're
Yeah.
banned from the parks. So I'm
Yeah.
a little bit surprised that's allowed in Japan.
Yeah. Maybe they don't know the rules over there yet. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe not.
Maybe.
I don't know. I'll ask my brother that, or if any listeners, because we do have listeners from Japan. So let us know. Is that a thing? I thought I read that somewhere. So the other one was written by you, Robert. Yeah. PS4 beats Xbox and Nintendo in brand recognition in both the UK and the US.
Yeah, this was from
Crazy.
Really?
Yeah,
Nintendo?
it's kind of weird because it's one of those things where it's like, oh well, you can only extrapolate so much data from a survey, Like obviously it's always going to be a limited pool of people, but at the same time, I mean, how else are you supposed to get data? You can't just go around asking everybody, absolutely everyone. But yeah, it's an interesting one because I think survey data is always good, especially when it comes to gaming or like things like this, like brands, industry stuff. It's always a good indicator of like current trends.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose when you look at the PS4 and what Sony's done this generation, it just makes sense that people know what PlayStation is. I think at this point, when you look at the hardware sales and you look at the advertisements, it's like everywhere. It has been for 5 years now. The Switch is only 2 years old. Xbox is kind of, I don't want to say falling off a cliff, but it's lagging. And it's that kind of thing. But I just thought it was interesting to see.
Yeah, I noticed a lot in just marketing blitzes on TV. You'll always see like Spider-Man is big right now. You'll see Spider-Man commercials all the time. Or when God of War was big, you'd see a lot of God of War commercials. Yeah. Or the Destiny Forsaken commercials are everywhere now, and those always have Sony at the end of them. Yeah,
that's another thing. People totally underestimate how much third-party marketing kind of pays into when it comes to things like mindshare, like consumer mindshare, and that's why obviously these surveys of brand recognition and stuff like that are a good indication of how much mindshare a company has. So like at the top of this survey, Apple was number one. Mm. And I think that, it's kind of like, it's one of those things where it's like, oh, well, of course Apple was number one. Look at how huge it is. Mm. But with Sony, number three, I think Nintendo was, Xbox was 11th and Nintendo was 17th, something like that. And I think it just goes to show like how much it's in public consciousness, and I think that's quite impressive. And like you say, it's these third-party stuff. You turn on the TV, you get an advert for Call of Duty, and that's PlayStation. You turn an advert, and it comes on for Destiny, and that's PlayStation, or FIFA, and that's PlayStation. So it's kind of, I think it's hard to get away from it, and so, I mean, it is at the end of the day, it's brand recognition. It's not like a marker for how well a company's doing overall. I don't think you can really take that away from it, but it's a good indicator of, just how well it's put itself out there to people.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was surprised that Nintendo wasn't as high as it was. Like,
yeah.
it surprises me a little bit. Maybe because the N fell off the side of the building in Japan.
It was a sign.
Maybe Nintendo is like 30th on the list and got a little too
That's
many.
right. That's right. And maybe the Nindies are more popular than Nintendo. I'm not sure, but no. No, I thought I was pretty surprised by that.
Yeah. I thought it was. I thought the craziest thing was that here in the UK, or at least, PlayStation was third and Google was fourth.
Wow.
And it's like more people recognize PlayStation over Google. Really?
Yeah.
What was second then? If Apple was first and Sony was third, what was second?
It was it was Lego. Lego was second.
Interesting.
So I thought that was weird. But then again, these surveys in the UK are always weird. I dread to think what people in the US or anywhere else in the world think of us when they see surveys like this. And it's like, they don't even know Google? What? These savages.
Well, we also think that you guys are getting lots of divorces over Fortnite too now.
This is true. With this, I feel like this podcast has painted a horrible picture of the British people being dragged through the mud here.
The Crash Bandicoot Insane trilogy keeps selling incredibly well in the UK. What's wrong with you people?
Yeah, that's another weird one.
Well, to be fair, we do. She's not here, but we do have a co-host from the UK. She's just not here, so she would be defending the UK if she was here. But that's your job now, Robert.
Oh God. Okay.
The last item that I have here is about Nintendo. This comes from Nintendo Life, your sister's site, and or is it brother? I'm not sure, but.
We'll just say sister. I don't know.
So we learned more about the online services, and one thing that we did learn is that the free-to-play games will not be affected by the subscription service for Nintendo. So that's cool.
Yeah, that's good.
That's surprising. That's actually surprising.
I mean, okay, so disclaimer, I write for a PlayStation website, but Nintendo's online service, not good.
Oh, really?
I don't think it's... I mean, it's cheaper than PlayStation Plus,
it's $20
Xbox
a
Gold.
year, Robert.
You know,
$20 a year.
But it's like... Okay, so Switch has been out for 2 years, and guess what? Now you have to pay it to play online. And it's like... Okay, fair enough. Like, PlayStation did that. PlayStation did it, but they did it when the PS4 launched. So it was kind of like, so it's a new platform. This is what we're going to do with PlayStation Plus. And it was kind of like, it came across a little better. Switch has been out 2 years, Nintendo turns around and say, guess what? Now we have to pay for online. And it's like, okay, we can take that, but what else do we get for a subscription? Well, you get NES games, or NES games, and it's like, NES games? Really? Okay, what else? And it's like, cloud saves? And it's like, nice, cloud saves. And it's like, yeah, but if you ever quit your subscription, you lose them. And it's like, okay, what else? That's it. I don't know. I mean, for $20 a year, that's nothing. You know what I mean? But in that same way, $50 for PS Plus a year, is that really much? The price of a game, and you get all those PS Plus games, and you get this, that, and the other. It's kind of like, I feel like the value still isn't there for Nintendo. And in that sense, free-to-play games, you don't have to have a Nintendo Online, which is great. And I assume that's what you meant by surprising, because it's kind of like, wow, Nintendo actually gets it for once. But at the same time, it's like, well, free-to-play games better be free, because they are on Xbox and Are they on Xbox? I don't know, but they are on PS4. And it's like,
really?
Okay.
So you don't need to have a P Plus subscription to play like Fortnite then?
No, yeah, you can play Fortnite for free.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
It's just stuff like, Destiny, Call of Duty, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I'm gonna play devil's advocate here. Not that I agree with any of this stuff. So I'm just playing devil's advocate. But you get 20 Nintendo games, and what kind of games are we getting for PS Plus with our free games?
Well, I mean, so hold on. What was PlayStation Plus for September again?
Destiny 2.
All right, okay, so you're getting Destiny 2 and...
What was the other one?
Dead by Daylight was one?
Was it? Oh, I can't even remember.
I remember Destiny 2. I don't remember the other one. But I own Destiny 2, which was kind of sad.
I mean,
I never played the game, but...
It's kind of nice. It's nice to subscribe to this Nintendo service and say, hey, look, he has like some classics, some real classics, and it's like, oh, that's cool. And that was funny, by the way, during Nintendo's little direct that they did with this, and then in that segment they ended it by saying, hey, guess what? We're also making NES controllers that you can buy to play these games, and it's like, really? But Nintendo are geniuses. They really are. Because I dread to think how many people will go out and actually buy those things just to play NES games. But yeah, what was I saying? Oh, but yeah, it's a nice little. It's cool, little classics and stuff. I get it, but I don't know.
Do you get into fights with the Nintendo folks? I'm just curious.
Constantly. Yeah, we've got. So obviously we use like chat rooms and stuff to keep up with each other all the time, and anytime it's like a mixed chat room, like a general chat room, there are always like heated arguments of, hey, you know, Crash Bandicoot was good, but he was never as good as Mario, and it's like, yeah, but look at how much it's selling, and it just goes back and forth. It's crazy. We hate each other. Absolutely hate each other.
That's awesome.
Imagine if you still had an Xbox site.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it wouldn't be worth going into these chat rooms at all.
That's actually what happened to the Xbox site. They lost it. It's like, we're going home.
Had enough.
Anybody else have anything else? Those are the news items that I had.
No.
Robert, do you have anything else?
Let's quickly check persquare.com.
Now you know what I do right before I go on the show.
I feel like the last couple of weeks it's just been Spider-Man. That's all I know. My brain is like 99% Spider-Man.
Nice.
But yeah.
Yeah. That's I was telling Robert before the show, Christian, how you beat Spider-Man in just a couple days, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, try my best. I did the same with God of War.
That's right.
Damn.
Yep.
I got to get him over with and behind me.
How many trophies do you have now, Christian?
As of this week, Spider-Man was my 89th or 79th platinum.
79.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's really impressive.
I was going to say 89 is impressive, but 79,
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. My eventual goal is 100. And the Spyro trilogy, I plan on getting all 3 of those platinums, just like I got the 3 Crash platinums.
You're awesome, dude.
So that'll pad my numbers a little bit.
That's crazy. Yeah. We gotta when we get our site up, we're gonna have to have the platinum race that you have going on.
Yeah.
And, the
Absolutely.
trophy room. Yep. How many platinums do I have, Christian? Do you know?
That is why your gamer tag is Rogue Leader 76, because you just got your 76th platinum in Spider-Man. Is that right, Roger?
That's not the reason my name is 76. Oh. I have
close.
0. I have 0. Yeah, you were pretty close. Off by
Do you have
76.
any, Robert, as a PlayStation editorial writer?
The only issue I have with getting trophies is I don't have enough time to get trophies.
Yeah.
It's like by the time I've got a decent amount of trophies, a new game comes out that I have to review. But I think I've got about close to 20, maybe
Close to 20, nice.
something like that. Yeah.
Nice.
Wow. Blue, are you a trophy hunter? Do you hunt trophies on PlayStation?
I probably would if I had the time. I have 0.
Yeah.
I have exactly 0.
Yeah, me too. That's okay. You and I are in the bottom of the race. That's okay. You know, somebody's got to hold down the lead.
Too?
I don't know. I
thought we were just going to sit back and watch Christian do it.
Oh, yeah. Watch him break himself as he goes for the 100.
Yeah. There's a psychological barrier you have to overcome to get those platinum trophies, because for the longest time, when trophies first came out, I was like, who gets these platinums anyway? No one's getting all these achievements. And then I started like listening to podcasts and stuff where people are like, oh yeah, I platinum this game. And I'm like, how did you do it? How do you do that? And then as a middle schooler, I committed to getting my first platinum, and it was Call of Duty World at War, and I was going to do it. and I did it. And I overcame that psychological barrier in middle school when I was still figuring out who I was as a person. And so now it's easy. I can just spend enormous amounts of time getting trophies.
Well, that was my problem then, that when I was a middle schooler, all I had was, Nintendo, and there was no trophies on the NES, so...
Exactly, Roger. It's a real tragedy.
Yeah, it is a tragedy. I could have been somebody. I could have been somebody special, yep. Instead, you weren't listening to this podcast, I'll tell you that, when you heard about trophies. So.
That's true.
All right, so let's talk about the games then that we've been reviewing. The first one I'll start with is Time Carnage on the Switch. Has anybody played this game?
No.
It came on a PSVR too. Did you play this game at all, Robert?
I did not.
Okay. Blue, did you play this game at all?
No.
No? Okay.
I don't even know that I've actually heard of it.
Yeah, it's a good game. I mean, it's if you like arcade rail shooters, you'd like this game. Yeah. So it's pretty much a port from the PSVR. So I heard it was really, really pretty brilliant on the PSVR. One thing that they tried to incorporate into the Switch version was the motion controls. So if you're going to get this game, turn those off, because you're not going to be able to play this game with the motion controls. I don't know. I don't know what was going on there, but it wasn't good. So turn it off and just play with controllers, and you'll enjoy your experience a lot more. So the game's not really that long. It'll probably take you about 2 hours to beat. There are 4 worlds, or I call them worlds, but I guess timelines that you go into. So there's like somewhat future, which has zombies in it, and then you go back in time to the dinosaurs, and then you go way into the future. Whoa. Where there's robots, which is so weird. Like, there's a zombie apocalypse, and then way in the future, there's robots. Like, what happened there? What happened between the zombie apocalypse and the robots that allowed these robots to exist? I don't know, but yeah, maybe. And then you go back in time, but not quite as back as the dinosaurs. But you go back in time, and you run into like undead Vikings. So the meat of the game is their story mode, or the campaign mode, and that's where you're going to want to start, because once you so the first world's only unlocked to you. That's the only thing that's unlocked to you. But as you unlock the game, more levels open up to you, and then also weapons open up to you as well. And that's really where this game kind of shines, because there's so many different weapons you can play with in this game. And playing around with the different loadouts is really what kind of made this game, like, what made it the most fun was just playing around with the different loadouts. I don't think they take themselves really seriously. It's kind of cheesy, and like when you shoot, if you could turn this off, but I wouldn't. When you shoot, like the bad guys go flying like, I don't know, like 10 feet up in the air. It's kind of fun to watch. Yeah, it's kind of funny. And then there's an arcade mode. So that's probably where you're going to spend most time if you're into these kind of arcade games, that you'd invite friends over and play like arcade. So it's just, wave after wave of nonstop bad guys coming, and you can set up what level you want it to be. So if you want dinosaurs in the future, you can have that. That's absolutely an option. So yeah, I mean, for what they were going to do, what they were trying to achieve, it is a good game. I wouldn't say it's the best game on the Switch, but it's a decent game for an arcade rail shooter.
Cool.
What about you, Christian? Stay.
Yeah, I played through Stay on the PS4. It just came out on the PS4 and Nintendo Switch, I believe, and it's been out on Steam for a little bit now. It was developed by the App Normals team, and this game is a little indie game that's very interesting and intriguing. The premise is that you are in this chat room on this computer, and you're following this character named Quinn, who seems to be kidnapped, and he wakes up in this dark corridor with nothing but a computer in front of him, and he goes on the computer, logs onto it, and he's in the chat room with no one but you. And so you've got to sit there and talk him through his situation, and make sure that he can make it out of there and figure out what's going on. And it's very similar to like a choose your own adventure, where a lot of what you're doing is just choosing dialogue options, and he's talking to you, and then you get the choice of like 3 options. Do I tell him to look at the door, or do I tell him to look at the wallpaper? Stuff like that. And I feel like it's overall an okay experience with some really great ideas. The namesake stay comes from the fact that there's this timer mechanic, and basically the game keeps track of the amount of time that you spend logged on playing the game and talking to him, and then it also tracks the amount of time that you spend off the game and away from him. And it seems like a really cool idea. It seems like they could do a lot with that, especially thematically, because this is very clearly a game that's meant to have a very like deep and lofty story that's very thematic, and it's full of philosophy references and like mythological references. But the stay time mechanic ends up feeling very mechanical and kind of more black and white, where like if you're gone for a few seconds, he won't even reference it and it won't matter. But if you're gone for like a handful of hours, he'd be like, hey, what's up? Thanks a lot for paying attention. And then it'll be game over, and then you start over from the nearest checkpoint. And so it's really? Like, what's going on with you, dude? Like, I don't agree with the themes that is pushing, because it just makes it seem like if you're not constantly on your device, making sure that you can respond to whoever needs responding to, then this person's going to die or something. I fundamentally disagree with the statement that that's trying to make, but that's okay. We can divorce ourselves from that statement of this stay mechanic, and you can largely ignore that mechanic also for the purpose of playing through the game, because a lot of what you're doing is just making dialogue choices. And he's got these 4 emotions. They're called the humors. They're the humors of Hippocrates, and I learned about these in high school, but I completely forgot about them. And I tried figuring out what they were by Googling online, and boy, did I not figure out what they meant. So you can ignore those. You can ignore your relationship status with Quinn, because that doesn't really play into things a whole lot. There are about a dozen endings that you can get, but I mean, you're probably just going to do another playthrough kind of choosing different things the other way. There's no real like exacting decision points the way that there are in a Telltale game, where you can be like, oh, I can let this person live or this person live. Here it's more kind of like wishy-washy. There's a lot more shades of gray, where I don't really understand how one decision would have influenced things differently. And there's certain decisions that are just a straight up game over. But what I did like about the game is that every now and then the action, or not the action, but the sitting there talking to him on the computer is broken up with puzzles, which are pretty fun. Everyone's different, and they don't give you any tutorials for the puzzles, so you kind of have to figure them out yourself. And I felt they were a nice change of pace for the things that were going on. And also the visuals are really great. They look kind of like an early DOS game, and they do great stuff with the animation work, and it all looks really pretty and great. And so, yeah, overall, I thought it was all right. My least favorite part was the main character, Quinn. I did not like him. He was very abrasive. One of your first exchange with Quinn is like, hey, what's up? And he's like, hey, just a dude with too many problems. And it's like, okay, it's nice that that's the first thing you'd tell me when you're kidnapped and I'm your only recourse.
But aren't you a psychologist or something like that, right? I mean, doesn't it make sense that maybe he would say, hey, dude, I got a lot of problems?
You are not, but he is. Quinn is a psychologist.
Okay.
Yeah. He's the therapist. And he's like,
maybe
yeah,
he
I
has
got
a
a
lot
lot
of
of
problems
problems. Yeah, he's like, I got some clients that probably would have done this to me. Whatever. I'm just going to die anyways. What's up? So, yeah, that Quinn guy, he's weird. And then there's also a lot of weird dissonance that happens. Like, there's scenarios in which he might be in danger, but he takes the time to like look down at his device that he can communicate to you with, and he's like, hey, there's something in here, might be in danger, gonna check it out right now. And he's just sitting there spending like 3 minutes on this device where he could possibly die, and he's just like, whatever, just letting whatever danger happen. So there's some of that in there, and it's weird, but overall, I'd say I'm glad that I had the experience. There's little bits of good stuff in there, and they do a decent job of setting up a mystery and, inspiring intrigue in the players. So, I'd say it would be worth a few hours of your time to see. Probably not, the like 30, 40 hours you'd have to put in to see every single ending.
So the stay mechanic reminds me a lot of, have you played the game Seaman?
I have not. I've seen it played very extensively.
I'm going to bring that game up every episode.
You are. You're going to have to find a way to just bring it up somehow.
Wait, is this the Dreamcast?
Yes.
Yes,
Dreamcast.
yes.
Oh, see, oh no. Yeah.
Have you played? Anybody else played the game, Steven?
I haven't played it, but like Christian, I've seen it. I've seen it played extensively.
Yep.
Same.
Okay.
What a game.
Have either of you played Stay? Robert, have you played Stay?
I haven't, but I have heard of it recently.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
And Blue, have you played this game?
No, I haven't. It doesn't sound like something I would probably choose on my own without having somebody recommend it first.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. You know, I think it sounded like such a cool concept, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like when they sent us the press stuff, I was like, "Oh, this sounds so neat! Like, what a cool concept." It's just unfortunate, like they didn't like take advice from Seaman and implement that.
Yeah, the stay mechanic, the timer mechanic, could have been implemented a little more dynamically. I understand how that would be very difficult from a developer standpoint, but if they were able to pull it off in like a second entry or something like that, that would be really cool.
It's too bad that Quinn annoyed you. You're like, I don't want to save this guy.
Yeah, exactly. I don't care about this Quinn guy. I just want to figure out how the heck he ended up here, and then I'm out. I'm bouncing, Quinn.
You figure it out so it doesn't happen again. Like,
Yeah.
dude, what are you doing?
Yeah, so I don't have to end up with another chump in the basement.
Yeah, exactly.
I think probably the moral of the story is don't go into chat rooms.
That is a really good moral.
Jeez, Blue. That's deep. I'm going to think about that the rest of the podcast. Thank
You know, there's a lot of Quinns out there.
Nice.
All right, well then let's do this. Let's take a break, and then when we come back, we'll get into our hot topic. So stay tuned.
Hey, it's Carrington from Real Dudes Podcast, and with me I have some fantastic co-hosts. Guys, why don't you introduce yourselves?
This is Andrew coming to you from Lynchburg, Ohio.
This is Cody coming from you also from Ohio.
And this is Kyle coming to you straight from the armpits of West Virginia. We are an indie gaming podcast. We all share a love for games. And you can check out our show on Podbean. Just search for Real Dudes Podcast. You can also find us on iTunes, Google Play, really any of the podcasting outlets that you like to use. Again, that is Real Dudes Podcast. Be sure to check us out on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. If you love video games, you will love our show.
Do you like video games? Do you like to read? Alright, guys, I know that those two things usually don't go so well together, but my new book, The Minds Behind the Games, Interviews with Cult and Classic Video Game Developers, is kind of like an ESPN 30 for 30 collection of interviews with some of the coolest creators in video game history. We're talking iconic games, Deus Ex, Mortal Kombat, Wasteland, NBA Jam, not so iconic, E.T., Night Trap, indie games, Pro Wrestling X, Towerfall. If you love video games, you will love my book. If you know nothing about video games and want to get in the know, read my book. It's available wherever fine books are sold: Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, Walmart, and of course my site, patrickhickeyjr.com. It's an awesome book. I had a ton of fun writing it, and simply put, if you want to get in the know and you want to find out stuff that's not even on Wikipedia, check it out. You won't regret it.
Do you remember the days when console games were pure simple fun? No loot crates, season passes or crowdfunding. You just paid for the game and it was yours to keep. You didn't have to sit through hours of boring cutscenes, and there were no loading screens to keep you from the action. At Four Horses Games, we remember those days and we aim to bring them back. Miles and Kilo, our latest release on the Nintendo Switch, is pure action from start to finish. Run, jump, slide and swing your way across 36 action-packed levels as you and your dog try to escape a haunted island, battling bosses along the way. Still need more? 20 tough achievements and a time attack mode keep you going that extra mile. Reviewers are saying that Miles and Kilo is a must-have title. Available now on the Nintendo Switch and coming to other consoles later this year.
And welcome back to GamerHeads. This week's topic, this is the reason I wanted to bring Robert on the podcast, because it has to do with game reviews. The topic is, what is the value that game reviews bring to the gaming industry, and how has game journalism changed? So we'll start with that question then, Robert, to you. What do you think the value is to game reviews bring to the game industry?
It's weird because I often think, are game reviews as important as they used to be? Like, do people look at game reviews, or do they just go straight to Twitch and see what the latest thing is and think, hey, this looks pretty fun? Or do they go straight to YouTube, slap in, Spider-Man gameplay, take a look at the game for themselves instead of reading a review? And I'm sure that plays into it, but at the same time, I think there's more importance placed on things like Metacritic, OpenCritic, than there has been since video games have been added to sites like Metacritic. I feel like reviews for the industry, I don't know, because obviously development teams and publishers look at things like Metascores, right? They'll look at the game that they've just published and they say, hey, does it have an 80+? And if it does, great, let's stick with that. Let's stick on that line with the sequel, whatever.
Yeah.
Does it have less than that? How does that impact the sales? I'm sure there's so much data that that companies infer from these type of things. But I don't think, I've never really been of the mindset that reviews are super important. I think they're just like Push Square's mindset, and personally my mindset is that reviews should first and foremost inform people on whether a game is good. So here's my hard-earned money that I've been working 9 till 5 to get. Do I spend it on this game? And if a review is good at telling you whether to buy it or not, then it's a good review. If it's a review that just rambles on about nothing, then no. So I always think that reviews should come first with the consumer in mind rather than the industry, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right, like a help. There should be there to help, is what I'm trying to say. First and foremost, and then you can put your writing flair and your style and your website's voice and everything like that on top of it. But first and foremost, they're for the audience rather than anybody else.
So follow-up question to that then, as you mentioned the Metacritic, and then how some companies use that as a measurement of whether or not the game is successful or not. Do you think there's a lot of pressure then on game industries to get like a high score on like an aggregate score on Metacritic? And do you think that that's kind of detrimental to even like how the game industry is, like how games are developed?
Yeah, it's one of those questions that's so like multifaceted, because I feel like if you're an indie developer and you put out a game and everybody loves it, everybody thinks, oh, this is really smart, this is really nice, great art style, whatever, and then it doesn't sell. And it's kind of like, well, all the reviews in the world don't... I think reviews can definitely help sell games in the sense that reviews come out at the right time, the embargo lifts, everybody's already hyped for a game, and then they read the reviews, and it's like suddenly vindication of their own hype, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it kind of gets like, oh, I'm so excited for Spider-Man. Oh, it got a 9 out of 10. Fantastic. I'm definitely buying it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it really depends, I think, on the kind of games, because with indies and things like that, in small independent studios, you might be hyped for a little indie game. A few people might think, hey, this looks really cool, I'm going to keep an eye on it. And then it comes out and it gets 6s and 5s and 6s out of 10.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like suddenly, for an independent developer, that must be scary. For sure. They must look at that and think, oh, God, somebody's going to read these reviews and think my game sucks. Yeah. And then they're not going to buy it. And what am I going to do? And is it going to even make a profit, etc., etc.? Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's a very complicated issue. I think Metacritic can be both a good thing and it can be detrimental.
Yeah. I think that question's very interesting, Roger, especially because I think in our modern video game landscape, in some sense, review scores on Metacritic and OpenCritic and stuff like that kind of mean more to the developers themselves, like you were getting at, than they do like to just your average consumer, especially with recent reactions that I've seen, like Cory Balrog filmed himself, the creative director of the God of War on PS4, opening up Metacritic and seeing the review scores, and he was just in tears because he couldn't believe that all of these like multiple years of hard work are actually paying off in the eyes of these critics. And also Brian Intihar, he's done interviews, the creative director on Insomniac behind the most recent Spider-Man game, and he's done interviews talking about just how nervous and how nerve-wracking it was checking that Metacritic score on the day of embargo.
Yeah, for sure. It's go on, Blue.
I'm sorry, go ahead. That the way you're just describing it, Christian, it sounds a little bit like how in movies, when it comes to the Oscars, because when you think about it, the films that tend to win awards at the Academy Awards are not generally the ones that people are rushing to the theaters to see.
Exactly. Yeah,
that's a good point.
But when you win an Oscar, it's like the culmination of your career because you've been recognized by your peers. And so it almost means more than a box office total would.
Yeah,
that's a good comparison.
Yeah, that's a good point. Blue, you can ask your next question.
Yeah, what do you find helpful or not helpful in a review? I know you touched on that a little bit before, but could you be maybe a tad more specific?
Again, so reviews for consumers first and foremost, so reviews for your audience. But I think something I've noticed more and more is reviews kind of, I think, or something I always like, because obviously I have to edit reviews as well on Per Square. So like, we get like volunteers who send in their reviews for things, and then we edit them down, put them on the website. Ideally, we don't edit them much. But yeah, it's. I think a bad review is one that reads like an instruction manual, where it's like, there's this mechanic, and there's this system, and there's this, and there's this. There's nothing wrong with breaking things down in a review, but there's something wrong with just listing things, because then it just becomes a list of, it might as well be a press release.
Yeah.
You've got to list things, and then you've got to bring your own criticism into it. This is good because, this is bad because. But something you don't often see, I don't think, in a general sense, is like how a game feels. I know that's really broad, but say, for example, Spider-Man, right? So Spider-Man is supposed to feel incredible to play, and I suppose it comes a little bit more into kind of the artsy kind of writing element of reviews. Like a really good reviewers are really good at describing things in really concise ways. So, for example, they'll just sum up the feel of Spider-Man in a sentence, and immediately you go, I know exactly what he's saying. And that's the best a review can get, in my opinion. It's like when a reviewer makes the sentence or the paragraph really click, and it makes you, even though you've never played the game, suddenly you get a feel for what it must be like to play. And I think that's always the most helpful in a review.
Nice. What changes have you seen in game journalism?
Well, I think when I first started reading game reviews, it wasn't on the internet, it was in magazines. So I've spent like years and years and years reading the official PlayStation magazine, unofficial PlayStation magazine, official Nintendo magazine, all these kind of things. And I think that kind of journalism has all but died, really, especially online. Because online's taken its own kind of, it's kind of like this mixture of blog style and this mixture of kind of, I suppose it must come from those magazines to some extent, but it's a bit of, you can see kind of trends from like film criticism and music criticism kind of come in there. I don't know. I don't think it's changed on a fundamental level, or at least I don't like to think it has. But I do think, because the internet's obviously given everybody a voice, everybody a platform to voice from. So it's far more diverse than it's ever been. It's far more diverse than it ever was when it was just magazines and you had like, you know, it was like a clique rather than anybody can start a blog now and write about games and, you know, get their point across. And I feel like that's obviously the biggest change. I suppose that's a bit of a rubbish answer, but it's the answer that I've got.
No, that's good. Anybody can start a podcast and talk about video games.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, as far as game journalism goes, I think it's just, I don't know. I think it's in quite an interesting place. Let's just say that much.
Yeah. Well, Robert, speaking of the changing video game landscape, how would you say that early access and the prevalence of early access games has changed the way you review games, with the most high-profile example being PUBG?
This is a hard one as well, because working on the website like I do with the other editors, with Sammy and Steven, it's kind of like we're short on time already. So if we have to re-review games, and we do get people asking, you know, can you re-review Destiny, or can you re-review any other kind of game that has like a live service, not necessarily early access, but anything that's, you know, ongoing. There's always getting updated. Things like, I don't know, Mass Effect, For Honor, anything Ubisoft puts out, you know, like Rainbow Six, even Call of Duty, it looks like, Battlefield, you know, once these expansions come out, can you do a re-review?
Yeah. And
it gets to a point where it's like, we would love to, but we do not have time to do re-reviews when we've got all these games coming out. So it's affected us in that sense. Whether it affects reviews, I think there's always, because obviously everything gets patched these days, right? So a game comes out, it gets a day one patch, and then, there's huge issues, and then we'll issue a week 2 patch, and that will fix most of the issues. And it's kind of like, well, you should have, you know, sometimes you get people saying, you should have waited until the second patch was out, when all of the issues were fixed, and it would have got a higher score. And it's like, yeah, but you can't do that when people are there to buy it right now.
Yeah.
You know, you've got to, as harsh as it may seem, it's like, yeah, but then again, that's not early access, I suppose. If we're speaking early access in terms of, you know, you don't have to pay for things like Founders Packs or anything like that to get it, then I think early access games are quite difficult to review. I think usually we would look at it from a standpoint of, is there enough game here to review, and if so, is it worth people's time to try out? Because obviously it tends to be free, something like Fortnite. In which case it kind of becomes I suppose, like, not like a traditional review, more of a hands-on kind of, hey, you should give this a look, rather than this is an 8 out of 10, even though next week it could be a 10.
Yeah.
You know, it gets a little complicated, I think, but I think on stuff like that, sites just need to have a standpoint, have to have like a firm standpoint. Hey, we don't review this. We review this depending on what state of development it's in.
Yeah. I think re-review requests like that are really interesting, because I feel like the people who are asking a re-review for a game that's received like a major expansion or patch are probably people who wouldn't benefit from the significant time and effort you'd put into re-reviewing something, because they just kind of want that score to be bumped up and feel vindicated for enjoying what they already enjoy. Yeah,
that's a really good point, because I feel like with reviews, especially these days, it's all about, so much of it is about vindication. You know, I pre-ordered this game and it just arrived today. I hope it gets a good review, because then I'll go play it with a smile on my face. And it shouldn't be that way. You know, you should just play games that you enjoy. Of course you should. And you should look at reviews and say, you know, I always say, like, I buy all my games based on Push Square's reviews. And it's like, well, I appreciate that, but maybe you should look at other reviews as well. You know, get like a more general consensus. I think that's always the way to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, they talked about this on another podcast, but I wanted to bring this up here too. I think it's different to review for games than movies, because like you said, movies are never going to get a patch. They might get a sequel, they might get a prequel, but they're never going to get a patch to that movie. Well, that's not necessarily true, I guess. I guess there might be some special editions of the movie that would come out with, like, you know, alternative endings or like deleted scenes, but games, like, I think that would be the most difficult thing, is I just think of like Mass Effect Andromeda.
Yep.
The newest one, because I know, Robert, you reviewed that game, right?
Yeah.
And they did patch it quite a bit, right after the game release, with all the complaints and such.
Yeah. Mass Effect was more than buggy at launch. That was a heartbreak of a review, because I never played the first Mass Effect when it came out, and then I never played Mass Effect 2 because it wasn't on PlayStation, but it eventually came to PS3, and I remember taking the day off college to play that game when it came out on PS3.
Sweet.
I was so excited. A massive Mass Effect fan.
Those Mass Effect 2 loading times on PS3 were atrocious.
Yeah, they really were. They were yikes. But yeah, Mass Effect Andromeda was not great.
Yeah, it reminds me of I'm sorry, I don't want to go too much on this, but there was another game that I actually really enjoyed. It was on a PS3, but now they just recently came out on PS4, and that was Defiance, the game Defiance, and it's based off. Well, they had a TV show, a sci-fi TV show.
Yeah.
And when that game came out, I think it was your publication that said there are more bugs in this game, and we're not talking about the ones that you're killing. We're talking about like there's so many bad. That game was so bad, but they did so much to patch that game that it really became like a small following, like a cult, like almost like a cult following of that game. And it was quite enjoyable. And then they came out on the PS4, and it was the same exact game, and I had to start all over, and I like leveled my character up, and I couldn't take that to the new one, and I was like, no, I'm not doing this all over again. Like, there's no way. I got into the beta because I was, in the original game, and I played it a lot, and I was like, I'm not gonna start it over.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just interesting to think about how different like a game can be, after a review, and it's so different than movie reviews. So just kind of interesting. Or even that's pretty new, right?
Yeah. But I mean, but that's where the toughness comes from. You say like Defiance got so much better with the patches, and it almost feels bad not to be able to go back and review it. It's not for a want of not wanting to do it. It's just we don't have the time to. We would love to if a game gets significantly better and say, hey, ignore this old review. It's really good now, but it's, what if we could?
Yeah. We kind of alluded to this a little bit, but I wanted to go into this a little bit more. How has YouTube affected game journalism?
I think it's had a gigantic impact on games journalism and the industry as a whole, obviously. Websites like YouTube and Twitch. I still think, obviously, people when YouTube really took off, and then when Twitch really took off, people used to say like, well, games media is dead. But I don't think games media is obviously far from dead. But it has impacted it to a degree where maybe games media isn't as cool as it used to be, because obviously now you've got your favorite YouTubers, you've got your favorite Twitch streamers who are playing your games, tune in every night to see your favorite Twitch streamer play the game, and you kind of base your opinion on that, and you don't really need websites to tell you what you want anymore. I do think there's like a kind of a street cred to being a streamer or being a YouTuber that websites don't have anymore. It's almost kind of, you know what I mean? It's not quite, it's not quite, it's not where the cool kids hang out anymore.
Yeah.
And I mean, it is. I mean, there's still room for so much like kind of like broader journalism in this kind of. I mean, you still get some great articles written about like, the latest little indie gem that nobody's heard about, and suddenly it's like, they've got one specific author really gushing about it, and nobody plays it on Twitch, so you've never heard of it, and it's this kind of thing. I don't know. Maybe it's a generational thing as well. One thing that we found on Push Square is that a lot of our audience are quite old. Well, not old, but God, I'm insulting our own audience. No,
I was gonna say I am an avid reader of Push Square. Yeah.
But I don't. But like our general audience are quite they're not teenagers. Put it that way, and it's kind of interesting that I've got a nephew who's maybe 13, 14, and he doesn't know anything about websites. He's like, do you watch certain YouTubers, or do you oh, have you seen this Twitch stream? And I'm like, damn, this is all he knows. He does not know websites at all. So I'm starting to wonder if it's like a real generational thing, but I don't know.
Yeah. I've got a little brother, and it's exactly the same. He's 14, and he just watches Twitch streams, YouTube videos, where even as just a 22-year-old, I still definitely tend to prefer like publications and a nice in-depth review that I can sit back and read.
Yeah, it's
Do you think maybe that has to do with who has enough time? 'Cause I would love to watch Twitch streams and everything, but if I can read a review in 2 minutes as opposed to watch a stream that's going to be an hour long, you know.
Oh yeah, I definitely think that factors into it as well, because there's been times when, say, IGN or GameSpot has brought out a review of a game, and you click the link through Twitter or through Facebook or wherever you found it on social media, and it takes you to a video, and there's always at least one or two comments saying, oh, I thought this was a written review, I don't have time to watch this. And it's kind of like, I see where that's coming from. Yeah, for sure.
Do you at Push Square, I know that you guys have some videos that you put out on YouTube. I know I've seen some like WWE 2K videos, but do you do that on a regular basis?
Well, the thing was, we used to there was a guy called Ben Potter. I don't know if any of you have heard of him, but he now he used to be our video editor. Okay. And he was supremely talented. Like that WWE video that he did for us has it's still our most viewed video on our YouTube channel, and it is so good. It is like incredibly well done, brilliantly edited. Ben is one of the funniest people I know, and but he sadly had to move on. He just didn't have time. He used to do the Push Square podcast as well, and he used to do all of our video content, but sadly he didn't have the time to do it anymore, and he moved on, and he's still doing incredibly well, still working in video. But now Sammy, when he has the time, does our video stuff, so it's not as in-depth as we'd like it to be, basically. But Sammy's always enjoyed the video stuff because he spent so many years writing on the website that it's kind of like a new thing for him to chase.
Sure.
And he's enjoying it, which is great. So
Nice.
So do you feel being required to review a game makes you play or look at it differently? Is it no longer fun? Is it work?
I think it really depends on the quality of the game. Like Mass Effect Andromeda, I saw, because being such a huge Mass Effect fan, I mean, the warning signs were there because it came out on early access, right? On EA Access, or Origin, or whatever it's called, and you know, like all the videos came out of the facial animations and all that kind of thing, and I desperately wanted to like that game when I was reviewing it. So it all depends on whether a game's good or bad. If it's a really good game and I'll get an early copy to review, it's like, hell yes, spend all night playing this. But if it's a bad game, it's like, I really have to slog through this so I can write a review. I really wish I didn't put my name down next to this on the review request document. And it's like, I mean, it's totally first world problems, but that's the problem with a reviewer, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, it all depends on how good the game is.
Yeah. Well, Robert, working for Push Square, which definitely has an emphasis on PlayStation things, do you feel that exclusively covering PlayStation and its games helps or hinders Push Square as a major video game publication?
I think it's a bit of both. It's got its advantages in that I think a lot of people who like a lot of hardcore PlayStation fans are attracted to the website because they think, hey, these guys are on my level. You know, these guys like PlayStation as much as I do because they're just a total fan site. And that's the way we're kind of like, everything we write is from a PlayStation perspective. So even if a new Xbox console launches, Sammy will be on hand to write a talking point about what this means for PlayStation. And I think that's a kind of a viewpoint that hardcore fans appreciate. At the same time, purely in terms of like a business sense, I don't know, you look at a website like Eurogamer, who are on our on the Gamer Network, which we're on with Nintendo Life. Eurogamer cover everything, so they cover the new PlayStation launch, the new Spider-Man. They also cover Pokemon Go, and they get all the traffic from Pokemon Go as well as Fortnite and this, that, and the other. So, you know, multi-platform all mounts up, especially with Nintendo being in such a swing that it is with Switch and stuff. And obviously we don't get any of that because we can only focus on PlayStation. So it's a double-edged sword, but I think I prefer it because with less... we still keep up with Xbox and Nintendo, obviously, because we've got to for like a kind of sake of perspective. But at the same time, it's kind of like we have a license to just go all in on PlayStation, if that makes sense. And it means that we get to really go deep into PlayStation, which I think is what as PlayStation fans is what we want. So hopefully the audience thinks the same.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite articles that you do every week is what are you playing? Like, I love the fact that you engage other, it's so cool. Like, I love the fact that you talk about what games you're playing, and then you ask the community what games you're playing. And I every week I'm out there saying what games I'm playing, so it's fun. I like that. Yeah,
I think that was. I don't actually know where that came from. I think Push Square started it. I don't think Nintendo Life did, but I think they adopted it. I think Sammy might have came up with it. But before I started writing for Push Square, I used to read all of Sammy's articles. And for a while, I was a bit of like, I was a Sammy Barker fanboy. I think I might have been the first Sammy Barker fanboy. And then when I started doing reviews for Push Square, I was like, oh my god, it's Sammy. I'm emailing Sammy. Which sounds insane now, because I'm like I consider Sammy like one of my best friends, if not my best friend. And it's kind of like I talk to this guy every day, and there was a time when I was younger when I was like, oh, it's Sammy Barker. It's Sammy Barker of Push Square. Absolutely hilarious to think of now. But yeah, the whole what are you playing thing, I think, was Sammy's idea. And I think it's just nice to include people. It gets the comments coming in, it gives a feeling of community, which I think a lot of websites lack. I think if there's one selling point of a YouTube channel or a Twitch streamer, it's that they have communities. They have the subscribers, they have the usual commenters, they have the usual people in the chat room on Twitch, they have the emotes, they have this, that, and the other. And I feel like websites really lack that. A lot, especially as websites get bigger and the audiences become wider, you lack that kind of that community feel. You're used to seeing this guy comment on this article, or you're used to seeing that guy comment on this article. And yeah, I think it's a really, I like pushing that angle, and I like being active in the comments and all that kind of thing. I always try to push that that side of it.
Yeah.
So, have you ever not gotten a game that you were previously excited about just because you saw a review that said it was bad?
I don't think so, but I think that's because of the position I'm in as a reviewer as well. Like, I know that a sense that like reviews are the be all and end all, like I don't get that at all, but I think that's because I actually review games. So it's kind of like, I think my perception on that's a bit skewed, but I definitely think people are put off by certain reviews, like we were saying earlier about indie games and stuff. There must be so many little games that come out in like 6 out of 10, and people think, not worth it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it gets, I think that's kind of a worry. A worry about reviews is that people take them. Well, people definitely take them to heart, way too much, like a personal insult. But it's not the way to go. The way to go is to just kind of make up your own mind and use the reviews as kind of a waypoint.
Kind of going into that then too, how do you balance playing games for reviews while also playing games just for fun?
One thing that we learned very fast, and to be fair, Sammy always said it would happen, and it kind of gets to a point where because we work from home, it's kind of like there is no downtime, if that makes sense. Yeah. So it's kind of like we're either reviewing a game that we're reviewing, or if we're not reviewing a game, it feels like we've got an eternity of free time, and that's when the backlog comes into the equation.
Yeah.
But sorry, what was the question?
Well, how do you balance your playing games for reviews while playing games just for fun?
Yeah, it's difficult, to be honest. It's another one of those things that's like totally first world problem, but it's like I try my best to enjoy a game that I'm reviewing. You know, if it's a game I've been looking forward to, for example, like I've just reviewed Dragon Quest, and it's a game I was looking forward to for years and years and years, and we've got review code, and I thought, I need to enjoy this. Don't rush through it. For the sake of the review, don't do it. And fortunately, I had the time to do that. But sometimes it's a case of, I really want to play this game the way I would usually play a game. And I like to take, like open world games or RPGs and that kind of thing. I like to take them slow, like really get immersed, and spend like hundreds of hours potentially. But it's so hard to do if you're stretching for an embargo. I think it's one of those things that comes with experience, for sure, because when I first started reviewing games, it was kind of like, I can't enjoy this game like the way I would want to, and that's impacting my enjoyment of it, and it's going to skew my perspective of the review when it eventually comes. But I think with experience, you get to a point where it's like, how fast do I have to play this game? Am I okay playing at this speed? Am I still going to enjoy it? Is it going to alter my thoughts when it comes to the review? I think it's, as with everything, it's kind of a case of balance. Getting the balance right of just making sure that you pace yourself when you're reviewing a game, or, you know, yeah, definitely comes with experience, but the potential is there to screw yourself.
Yeah. Two follow-up questions to that then, Robert. So, one, how big is your backlog?
Oh, God. I think my immediate backlog is maybe like 4 or 5 games that I haven't finished. And then beyond that is like 3 years worth of like indies, PlayStation Plus games, and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel so bad then.
It's not too bad because, like I say, it's like it's an experience thing. So the longer, I mean, I've reviewed games for years and stuff, so it gets to a point where you're used to moving on, if you know what I mean. You're used to just saying, okay, cut this game here, good place to end it, I'm not bothered about getting 100%, I'll move on. Because, like, when I was younger, and like back in the PS2 days and stuff, I would, like, 100% every game. And that is just not possible now, and it's kind of like you have to just come to terms with that, I think.
Yeah, that's actually was going to be my follow-up question. Do you feel like you have to beat a game 100% to be able to review the game?
I think that's a tough one. And in an ideal world where we do re-reviews of games, we also 100% games before you review them. And sometimes it's possible. Sometimes the publisher's really good with the code, and they give it like a month early. Like, and then you suddenly like, damn, I've got all this time to play it. I can play it at my own pace. I can get 100%. I can do a full review and be totally 100% of my opinion. But a lot of the time it is not possible to 100% a game in the time that we have. So it comes down to just kind of being confident in your experience of critiquing games, and 2, being confident in your ability to actually play games well, I suppose. Because there have been times where, and I've heard some horror stories as well, where reviewers have got games and they haven't been able to play them properly because they either haven't been prepared for that kind of gameplay, or maybe they're not quite used to it, or maybe it's a completely new concept for a game, something like that. And they've just had like a nightmare getting to the embargo for it, because they're thinking like, what if nobody else has had this problem? What if I just suck at the game? What if I'm not good enough to be a reviewer? And all these problems kind of mount up. I think reviewing's pretty stressful a lot of the time, like especially if you're totally new to it. I can totally see why some people kind of want to steer clear of writing about games.
Yeah. Yeah, speaking about just writing reviews, Robert, in your experience, do you ever kind of encounter writer's block or have difficulty finding the right words to describe a game you're reviewing?
I think it's yet another question of like being used to the job and being experienced in it, because I think in the early days there were times when I would spend ages writing just one news story, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And I think that it just comes with practice. You get into like a kind of a rhythmic flow, especially when it comes to writing. You know, like you can tell. It gets to a point where you can tell who's written what by the flow of the writing and the rhythm of it, like the sentence structure and this, that, and the other. But that's like obviously really technical. But yeah.
You don't need to answer, Robert. It's okay.
Or okay. Like all right. Give me the question again.
Okay, Robert. I'll do this one slow.
Okay, go on.
Ever encounter writer's block?
Oh yeah, writer's block. See, this is I got answers block is what I've got. Got podcast block.
Podcast block. That's good.
No, but yes. For the Dragon Quest review, it was a weird one because it usually doesn't happen for me personally, and I think that's I'm very thankful that it doesn't, because again, horror stories about some people who have writer's block.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it helps because obviously I write news, I write features, all that kind of thing. It just keeps the flow going, you know. We don't really have time to stop. That's the problem. We don't have time to screw around.
Yeah.
So if you've even got writer's block, it's kind of a case of powering through it, and I don't think that's particularly healthy, but it's kind of necessary. And but with Dragon Quest, it got to a point where it was like I was so anticipating the review, and because I enjoyed the game so much that I almost found it hard to put into words, which was weird because it had been a long time since I'd done that, since I'd been so excited for a game, and I was like, I've got to tell people it's good. I've got to tell everyone that I really loved it. And I think it's a case of trying too hard. It's the same with a lot of things. Like you try too hard to get your point across, and it's suddenly the flow stops. It's like turning a tap on and off, I guess. But yeah.
Interesting.
So, can you tell us about some of the people that you've drawn inspiration from as a game reviewer? I know you've mentioned Sammy a few times, but is there anyone else?
Yeah, definitely Sammy, #1 Sammy fanboy. But
are you waiting? Are you gonna get a bonus or something? Is he gonna listen to this podcast and you get a raise at work?
But hopefully, no. Unfortunately, Sammy isn't in charge of the financial stuff. He's just the brain and the jaw that keeps everything going. But like I mentioned, we mentioned them earlier, but magazines when I was a kid, gaming magazines, because gaming magazines, especially in England, in Britain, always had like this they were so cheeky. They were so tongue in cheek and so like risky, really, really risque. And they used to have like these whole sections. There was like I remember this was the official Nintendo magazine when the GameCube was out. And they used to have a section where people used to send in letters to like say, you know, hey, I read your magazine, blah, blah, blah. And me and Sammy often jump back to this to try and recapture our youth. But we end up talking about the Nintendo official magazine letter section where people used to send in photographs of smashed PlayStations. And people from the magazine used to like reply in the letter section saying like, got another one, great job. And it was like, damn, it was a level of fanboyism that was like, but back then it wasn't really fanboyism. It was just like it was just a laugh, you know. It was all just a joke, and you just don't get that anymore. You don't get like the really risky headlines or like the sexual innuendos and all this kind of stuff. So me, Sammy, and Stephen, we always try to bring a bit of that back, because that's ultimately what we were all inspired by when we were younger. Was these really what's a good word to describe them?
Edgy.
Yeah, like maybe edgy's a bit strong, a bit very. I don't know. I suppose like quintessentially British, like very kind of just like being a bit of a shite. You know what I mean? Like a bit of a yeah.
Yeah.
Who does this guy think he is? It's a bit like that. But yeah, I think that's where most inspiration. And then once the internet was a thing and websites were a thing, it was Eurogamer, GameSpot, all the big ones. And I used to read those like religiously. And that's pretty much it.
Wow. Just out of curiosity, before I go into the games we're playing, do you own a Nintendo system? Do you own a Switch?
I do not own a Switch, but I am being peer pressured into buying one.
Oh yeah.
I'm a huge Smash fan, Smash Bros, and Pokemon and Fire Emblem. Yeah, you might have to just take this whole segment out, to be honest, in case it jeopardizes the job. No, but I kind of want to switch just so it can be my Smash Ultimate machine. Because that game just looks incredible. As a Smash fan since Smash 64, that game is like, wow. I need to buy this. I need to buy a Switch. I've always been a big, massive fan of Nintendo handhelds. So I think Nintendo, even as a PlayStation writer, I always said Nintendo had the best handheld devices. Definitely. The Game Boy Advance, I think the Game Boy Advance SP was probably like the greatest little handheld console of all time.
Yeah.
I think, like the little flippy one, that was so good. And I think the 3DS is brilliant. I think the 3DS is superb. I still play Pokemon on that from time to time. Fire Emblem as well. They've released that Dragon Quest VIII port on 3DS, which is so good.
Yeah, that was good.
So yeah, I think the Switch is on the cards. We'll see.
Okay. Well, if you get it and you're gonna play Smash, I think we'll challenge you. We'll take you on.
Ooh, let's do it.
All right. Well, then let's move into the games that we're currently playing. And Robert, since you're our guest, what games are you currently playing?
I'm
if
playing.
you can talk about them, I don't know if you. I mean, obviously the ones you're on Umbrella.
Oh, I'm all right with embargoes at the minute. The only game I'm reviewing at the minute is Destiny 2 Forsaken, the expansion.
Okay.
So I've been playing a lot of that. I'm still playing Dragon Quest, even though I finished it for review, but there's kind of like a lot of endgame stuff, which is great.
Nice.
I still jump back into Yakuza Kiwami 2 now and then.
Oh, cool.
Because it's just such a fun game to just walk around the streets of Kamurocho and just beat the crap out of people.
Yeah.
And then go karaoke singing like there's nothing wrong.
Heck yeah.
Like you haven't just left people like you haven't just crippled a person and left them in a gutter. Just, that's superb. What else? Tekken 7. I'm always playing Tekken.
Yeah.
Like Tekken.
You were up until like 2 a.m. the other day, weren't you?
Yes, I was playing Tekken for hours. I learned I learned a new character the other day, and I've been like it's because fighting games are special in the sense that suddenly you get this itch to go back on them, and suddenly you get this itch to try a new character, and suddenly when you learn that character, it's like it's a whole new game.
Yeah.
And so Tekken 7 is a constant for me, but Destiny 2, Forsaken, which I've been enjoying. That's me, pretty much.
Nice. Blue, what about you? What have you been playing?
This week I finished up Blackout, which is an indie game on the Switch, an indie puzzle game. It's real cute and it's real fun.
Nice.
And then I also started a game called Chef Brigade, which is...
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, so you go out and you have to kill the monsters first, and then you take the ingredients into your kitchen, and then it's a little puzzle game where you cook the ingredients. So I just started that this week. I'm trying to get into that, and it's... I wish it was more of the gameplay and less of the story in between. So far is my initial impression.
Interesting. The first game that you played, would you... Well, I'll ask off air. I was going to ask if you want to write a review. We can talk about that off air.
I actually have a review for it up on thelootgaming.com.
Oh, you do?
Oh, cool.
Okay.
I do,
nice.
so feel free to check that out.
Nice. What about you, Christian? What have you been playing?
Yeah, I've been playing a couple things. This week, like we mentioned earlier, I finished Spider-Man for my 79th Platinum, and I was very excited about that. After 100%ing it, I was still pretty lukewarm on it. The gameplay is incredible. The story still didn't do it for me. But you can read the review for that at GamerHeadsPodcast.podbean.com on the reviews tab. And I finished Stay over the week this week. You can read the review for that. Roger, you can read your review of Time Carnage there. Otherwise, other things that I played are the Black Ops 4 Blackout beta. I played a handful of hours of that on PS4 and then a handful of hours of that on PC, since the open beta for that is open on PC this weekend. And it's certainly PUBG and Call of Duty. They certainly did that. They pulled that off somehow. I mean, it runs pretty well. It's first-person shooter. It's 60 frames per second. It feels good, but it's very different than something that feels more optimized for consoles like Fortnite, where you're running in buildings, you're looking down at the ground a lot, which feels very weird, especially on console, is having to look at the ground to look at what you're about to pick up and equip. And it leads to like this weird, just like looking down, looking at the stuff, spamming square, and then having to look back up to make sure you can defend yourself against any encroaching enemies. And because of that, I feel it's better and more at home on PC, where it's just a flick of the wrist of the mouse to just look down, pick up everything, then flick back up so that you can be prepared for anything that's coming your way. Whereas on the PS4, I feel like it's going to be a lot of people looking at the ground, looking for stuff to pick up, and then another person running in and then just blowing them away because they were looking at the ground at the time. Because like horizontal movement isn't as bad as on consoles, but vertical up and down tends to be something that's a lot more cumbersome on consoles. But I feel like that was largely the main difference that I noticed between the two versions. There was a little bit, I'm not sure if it was my network connection or not, but there was a little bit of latency on the PS4 side of things. And currently their player count was at 80. And over the course of the closed beta this week, they bumped it up to 88. So they're getting closer. I don't think it's going to get much higher than that, considering the game comes out in like a week. And 100 players or 99 players is that magic number. But I don't think they're going to reach that, and I don't really think they really need to, because, I mean, you don't really notice those extra 12 players, especially considering how kind of small the map is for a Battle Royale map. And during their reveals and during their talks and press conferences, they were really talking up the size of the map, and it's bigger than any Call of Duty map. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. Your Call of Duty maps are tiny. That doesn't really tell me much. So
10 times bigger.
Yeah, exactly. So as a result, the map, I'm kind of disappointed in what they did. During their announcements and whatnot, they were saying that it's kind of a quintessentially Black Ops experience, where they're just taking everything Black Ops and just smushing it into this big map. And when you actually play it, it feels less like that, and it feels more just kind of this generic PUBG map that has a couple points of interest that vaguely kind of represent Black Ops maps in the past. So like there'll be this Nuketown Island, and it's called Nuketown, but it only kind of vaguely represents Nuketown. Or there's the firing range from Black Ops 1, which they remastered for Black Ops 2, and they just keep bringing that firing range map back. But they put it in this Battle Royale place, and it's just kind of this vaguely fire range looking area. And it's kind of disappointing in that sense, because like Black Ops 1 especially, I know those maps very well, and I would have really appreciated being able to navigate them much better, having all that knowledge. But instead, it's just kind of these areas strewn about this grassy wasteland. So it feels very much like PUBG in that sense. I really wanted them to just go all out crazy bonkers and just have like completely different biomes, just like cut and paste entire Call of Duty maps, just one after the other. I was hoping that they would do something more like that. They don't, and it's fine. I mean, it's really weird because it feels not very Call of Duty. Call of Duty, you're running in, you're killing people, you're dying, you're immediately respawning. It's got that really fast pace to it. Whereas this Battle Royale, it's much slower paced. It's got that Battle Royale pace where you'll find the weapons you want, and then you'll just kind of sit, and then you'll wait. And then someone will come, they'll show up, and those 2 seconds will cause you to die, and then you'll have to wait 30 minutes to get to that point again in another match. So if that's what you want, I mean, you're going to have that there. What I'd really like to see about this Blackout mode when the game comes out is kind of the player count and whether or not they can sustain like a good player base for this, because a big draw of Battle Royale, at least for me, is being able to die and then just get immediately back into a game, and being matched with 87 other people almost immediately is really nice, and it kind of reduces that barrier to entry. And so I don't know what they're going to do with the Battle Royale mode with this, because in the beta, there's like different modes. Like over the week they were doing, okay, now you can only play a solo game. Okay, now you can only play duos. Okay, now you can only play squads. And then they also had different modes like, okay, now only shotguns will spawn, so you have to do encounters more close range and stuff like that. And I don't know if they're going to have all those options available on release, and I feel like doing so would kind of segment the player base a little too much, and that would increase those wait times in order to get right back into a game. But we'll just have to wait and see how they actually end up integrating that into the final product. And I think that could be detrimental on Activision's side to introduce new maps for Battle Royale through DLC as well, because then if someone has this one Battle Royale map and they want to play it, they might have to end up waiting 30 minutes for the full 88 players to get in. And I feel like that could be like almost render that portion of the DLC useless, like waste your money on at that point. And this is like a Call of Duty package that has 2 other entire modes. So you're paying $60 for the privilege to play Battle Royale, which is 1/3 of the game. It's just very strange. And I'm very, I'm very intrigued to see where this Blackout mode will end up on the side of Battle Royale winners and losers. But it's interesting. It's very interesting. There was... Yeah, what do you guys feel about this Blackout mode?
I was just going to say, like, the Battlefront, the first one did that too, where they had the DLC for, I'm talking about Star Wars Battlefront, where they had DLC for different levels, and I remember, that was a big contentious part of that game, and that's when EA came out with the second one. They said, all levels are going to be available to everyone, except the fact they had other microtransactions, which,
yeah.
It sucks.
Yeah,
but
Call of Duty's been doing that ever since Call of Duty 4, where you need to buy the map pack if you want to get into those DLC maps, and they haven't changed that since. World War II is that way, and I believe that's their intention with Black Ops 4, because I believe they're selling a season pass in which you have to get it if you want to get in those multiplayer maps with everyone else.
Do you think that this game's gonna you think it's gonna surpass Fortnite? Do you think it's gonna take it as the king of battle royales?
For me, absolutely not. And I think for the general public, absolutely not, because Fortnite has that, universal appeal. Like Robert was talking about earlier, it has the mind share. If you say Fortnite, you think Battle Royale, and there's just a really low barrier to entry with Fortnite. It runs really well. It's very well optimized for consoles, especially because instead of looking down all the time, the weapons and ammo that drops just like hovers above the ground. So you can keep your reticles kind of aimed forward and always be prepared for whatever comes in your path, where that's kind of an oversight on Call of Duty's part. So I feel like, no, Fortnite's going to remain the king in the Battle Royale genre, I think, going forward.
Yeah, I don't think...
Oh, sorry.
Go on, Blue.
It's a whole other market as well.
Exactly.
You're talking about the pacing issues, and I just don't see the hardcore Call of Duty crowd tolerating that very well.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
And I was
maybe
earlier about how my husband and his friends, they always abandoned Fortnite after just a short time, and I know it's because they spend a fair amount of time just waiting around to play.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's like what you were saying about the first person, Christian.
Yeah,
I hadn't even considered that, but it's a really good point. Like the fact that you're gonna have to look down and then up and then down and then up and then down, and it must. Yeah, I'm sure you're going to see a lot of highlight reels where people are just like kind of going around in little circles around like these items on the ground, not even looking where they're going.
Exactly. Yeah, that's interesting. But yeah, I'm really curious to see what ends up happening with this Battle Royale game going forward. But there is one other game that I finished this week, and it was a game that came out on Steam a couple days ago. It's currently $8. It's on sale for like $7 and some change, I think. Maybe $6 and some change. And this game is called Trinity. And it's an indie game, and it uses Unreal Engine, and it's a 3D puzzle game. And I'm not a big puzzle game person. I don't usually, seek out the nearest puzzle game at all. I really enjoyed Portal 1 and 2. I love The Witness. So I can enjoy a good puzzle game, but I don't seek them out. And this Trinity game, I want to say, is the first game I've ever played that's so bad that it's fantastic. It is brilliant, this Trinity game, because, okay, so the puzzle mechanics, they're fine. I mean, they're just kind of, you get what you get. So it's kind of interesting. You've got these white square platforms strewn about levels. And then basically you have 3 colors that you can assign to these white platforms. You can do blue, which will cause the platform to move along a set route. Or you can do yellow, which will cause like a path to shoot out of these white platforms. Or you can do red, which will make the platform really bouncy. And it's not really, all that groundbreaking stuff, but they do some fun, clever stuff in there, I suppose. And they do a pretty good job of ramping things up and introducing new mechanics and new things that you can accomplish with those 3 different colors. But the way that they reward you after completing these puzzles is they give you little sentences on the wall about this very deep story about life and death. And it's supposed to be very deeply thematic. It's supposed to be very serious. But these people clearly are not like native English speakers, and there are a lot of grammatical errors, and a lot of these sentences are completely unintelligible. You can't understand them. There's no cohesion to any of these sentences, and it comes off as someone...
It's part of the puzzle.
Yeah, exactly. It comes off as someone trying to sound like a philosopher, and I absolutely love it because it makes no sense, and they're trying so hard, and they're failing so badly, and that's what makes it so amazing. Because I've played games that were like deliberately designed to be bad before, games like Goat Simulator, where like the ladder climbing animation in Goat Simulator is just like your goat slamming its head against the ladder and it just flailing about. Because they were probably just threw their arms up there like, how's a goat going to climb the ladder? I don't know, just turn on ragdoll physics and call it good. So that's a game like Goat Simulator is very intentionally trying to be bad and appeal to that crowd. Whereas this game, it's the only game that I've played that's so bad it's good because they're trying so hard. But they're not getting it. They don't get it. And it's just so hilarious. This is the first game in a long time, this Trinity on Steam, that actually had me in tears because I was laughing so hard. These quotes are amazing. Oh, man. I've got a bunch of them screenshotted.
Do you have a quote?
I do. You'll have to give me some time to pull them up.
Okay.
But
all right.
Yeah, overall, the game's fine. It very heavily uses reflections very often. So everything is really shiny, which is weird. And like you'll think you're walking into the next area and it's just a reflection and you smack into the wall. They're very clearly using like really out of the box Unreal Engine stuff.
Yeah.
And
not properly, it sounds like.
Yeah, not properly. But yeah, this game is it's fascinating. I feel like it is well worth, at least for me, it was well worth the $8 purchase price because this game is just something else. Like one quote, for example, is, "I understand the meaning of choice and consequence. I embrace the systematic nature of life with all its ramifications."
Dude, that's deep. That's really deep.
Yeah.
I got a tear in my eye from that.
Yeah.
Oh,
or
wow.
At some point, an overwhelming clarity surrounded me. I accepted life as a chaotic puzzle that makes sense as a whole.
Wow.
Yeah, and they
words
just
to live by.
Yeah,
that belongs on a T-shirt somewhere.
It does, man. I love this game.
Calendar, yeah.
You should, yeah. The game is very sporadically beautiful. Like there's certain moments where the game looks like striking. It looks very nice, and the way that they handle reflections in certain sections looks really great. Because I think they just kind of turned reflections on everywhere and just let the specific instances in which the reflections look good just stay there, and then just let everything else look like junk. Because yeah, it looks pretty like scatterbrained in some sections, and it's hard to figure out what's going on sometimes. And the puzzle design in particular is incredibly frustrating because there's lots of puzzles where it's pretty clear how you're supposed to reach your goal, what you're supposed to do. But in other ones, it's like there was one example where I couldn't figure out what the heck I was supposed to do with the puzzle. And so I kind of just like clipped up against a wall on this little lip that was on this wall. And then I used the wall to walk around to the area that I was supposed to go. And I did the puzzle, I guess. I walked around the lip and I did it. And that happened on several occasions. No, it was not.
That's how I play Spider-Man, by the way. I just walk.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, this Trinity game is fascinating. It's enamored me in a way that no video game has before. It's truly something special.
Sounds like a fun time. Sounds about as good as Grandma. What was that game that Ben was playing?
Grandma. That was it, yeah. Grandma. That mobile game.
Yeah, sounds about as good as that game. Mm-hmm. Quality gaming there, Christian. Quality gaming.
Yeah, it was.
For myself, let's see. What have I been playing? Oh, I played Time Carnage, obviously. So yeah, like you said, the review is up at gamerheadspodcast.podbean.com. You can check that out. We also got another game that I've been playing called Super Dungeon Tactics. If you are a tactic RPG fan of those types of games, this is a really fun game, and it's makes it. I played tactical RPGs before, and I feel like I could just kind of brute strength my way through the game. Mm-hmm. This one I can't do that with. You actually have to like apply strategy. Shocking, right?
Yeah,
like a strategy RPG that actually applies strategy. And there's some really cool mechanics that they're doing with this game. Unlike where you like level up your character, it's all based on your equipment, and then there's die rolls that happen right before each round of battle, and then those dice rolls, based on what equipment you're wearing, could give you side effects, either positive or negative, based on the dice. So it's really an interesting mechanic, and the humor is very cheeky, so I like it. It's funny. I'll have to talk more about that. We're actually going to have the folks from Underbite on the show later in October. So I'm probably about halfway through the game right now. So, yeah. Other than that, I did win a game as well. I know. I won a copy of Full Blast. I only played a little bit of it, and it is 1943 in the future. So you have like a spaceship in your. It's fun. I love 1943, and you know, so it's just newer graphics.
Oh. I was thinking Battlefield 1943 for some reason.
No.
Battlefield game
sorry.
that was exclusive on
1942,
PS3
I
and
guess.
Xbox 360.
I thought, I'm sorry, it's 1941, 1942 is the game, not 1943.
I know what you're talking
about. The old NES games that I loved those games as a kid. I loved going to the arcade and plugging in quarter after quarter on those games. So I'm really enjoying my time with that. And I played 5 minutes of The Messenger, like 5 minutes. I haven't gotten very far.
It's good.
Yeah. Okay, before we go then, let's go around and talk how people can get a hold of us. Robert, if people want to follow you or read your articles, how can they do both?
Well, you can find me on pushsquare.com, which is the website I write for, on there every day of my life. And then I'm also on Twitter, at ShogunRock, ROK. That's about it.
Nice. What about you, Christian? How can people get a hold of you?
You can reach me at my GamerHeads email, christian@gamerheadspodcast.com. You can reach me at Twitter at christiancupsa, or I'm watching the Facebook channel for GamerHeads Podcast at facebook.com/GamerHeadsPodcast.
Yeah. And Blue, how can people get a hold of you?
You can read my stuff on thelootgaming.com or thewellreadmage.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at WritersView. It's WRYTERS View, one word. And then I also have a website, writersview.com.
Nice. And for GamerHeads, you can follow us on Twitter. That's GamerHeadsPC. You can also, so if you reach out to us, you'll be talking to me on there. And then you can also email us at info@GamerHeadsPodcast, or you can email me directly, Roger at GamerHeadsPodcast, or Christian at GamerHeadsPodcast. Blue will have to set you up so you can get your own email too for GamerHeads.
Yeah.
So
Yes, totally. And then when you ask
All
a
right.
question at the end, I can say you can also find me on GamerHeadsPodcast.com.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Robert, thank you so much for being on our show.
It has been a pleasure.
Good. I'm glad. I hope you had fun.
I have. I'm bouncing off the walls. No, but it has been very fun. I've enjoyed the banter.
Oh, good.
Loved it.
Christian, thank you so much for being on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you, Roger.
Blue, thank you for being on the show.
Yes, thank guys. It was a good time.
And thank you, listeners, for listening. Until next week, GamerHeads out.